I had always loved the idea of cruising, days spent basking in the sun, nights filled with fine dining and entertainment. So when my sister convinced me to join her on a week-long voyage through the Caribbean, I barely hesitated. It was supposed to be the perfect escape. But nothing about that trip felt perfect once we were stranded at sea. The first 2 days had been exactly as advertised: pools, unlimited buffets, and endless cocktails. But on the third evening, something went wrong. I remember sitting in the dining hall, watching the ocean shift from deep blue to an almost black void through the large glass windows. A sudden jolt made the entire ship shudder, as though we had hit something massive. People glanced around nervously, but the staff reassured us, just some unexpected rough waters. But then, the power flickered. Just for a moment. The room was cast into near darkness before the generators kicked in. The lights dimmed, but stayed on. I exchanged looks with my sister. Something was off. The captain's voice came over the intercom. He explained that they were experiencing minor mechanical issues and that everything was under control. He assured us that there was no need for concern. Some passengers continued eating, laughing off the disturbance, but others, myself included, felt uneasy. It was a cruise, after all. Ships weren't supposed to shudder like that. An hour later, a low hum beneath my feet vanished. The ship lost all power. The lights went out, and this time, they didn't return. Within moments, the air felt stifling, the absence of the ventilation system making the crowded dining hall unbearably warm. There was confusion at first, then panic. A crew member announced that backup power was being worked on and instructed everyone to remain calm. But there was no hiding the worry in his voice. We gathered at our cabin, hoping for an update. The emergency lights in the hallways provided little comfort. Outside, the ocean stretched in all directions, a vast emptiness that felt suffocating. There was no internet, no phone service, just the sound of lapping waves against the ship's hull. That's when we realized something far worse than a power outage had happened. The ship had stopped moving. For hours, we remained in limbo, waiting for further announcements that never came. People grew restless. The buffets were picked clean. Water bottles disappeared from vending machines. The staff, once so polished and accommodating, avoided eye contact and whispered amongst themselves. The captain hadn't spoken since his last announcement, and rumors spread like wildfire. By the second night, fear turned into something uglier. People argued over food. Crew members locked certain areas to prevent looting. Without working plumbing, the bathrooms became unusable. The air smelled foul. Desperation turned into aggression. I heard shouts down the hallway, fights breaking out over supplies. Then people started disappearing. At first, it was subtle. A couple who had gone to demand answers from a crew member never returned. A woman swore her husband had left their cabin in search of fresh water, only for him to vanish without a trace. Security denied it all, claiming people were simply panicking and wandering to different parts of the ship. But how did they explain the screams in the night? By the fourth day, I knew we had to find a way off the ship. My sister and I scoured for anything that could function as a makeshift raft. We weren't the only ones. Small groups of passengers began forming, whispering in the hallways, planning their escape. Then the first body was found. A crew member discovered a man floating in one of the pools, his face bloated, his limbs unnaturally twisted. The whispers turned to terrified murmurs. Someone had done this to him. And if that was the case, then we weren't just stranded at sea. We were trapped with a killer. The ship's staff stopped answering questions. The captain remained silent. The food supply dwindled. More people vanished. I barely slept, always listening, always waiting for the next scream. On the seventh day, a cargo ship spotted us. Rescue teams boarded, taking control of the situation. What they found was chaos. Passengers dehydrated, starving, and terrified. Several were missing, never to be found. The captain was discovered locked inside his quarters, refusing to answer for what had happened. I never thought much about the dangers of cruise ships. To me, they had always been floating paradises, endless buffets, live entertainment, and a chance to disconnect from reality. When my best friend, Jake, invited me on a 5-day cruise to celebrate his promotion, I didn't hesitate. It was supposed to be a carefree escape, but that trip ended up being anything but. The first night was a blur of cocktails and laughter. The ship was massive, a city on water, and I remember feeling small as I stared out at the endless dark sea from our balcony. I didn't know then how terrifying that vast emptiness would soon become. Jake had a habit of making friends everywhere he went. By the second day, he'd already befriended a group of passengers who were eager to drink and party as hard as he did. I was more reserved, preferring to soak in the atmosphere rather than chase shots until dawn. We had a small disagreement that night, nothing serious, just me telling him to slow down, him laughing it off. I went to bed early while he stayed out. The next morning, Jake was gone. At first, I wasn't concerned. He was probably passed out in someone else's cabin, sleeping off a hangover. But by noon, when he still hadn't answered my texts or shown up to eat, I started to worry. I checked the bars, the pool deck, even asked around if anyone had seen him. The answers were all the same. He had been with them last night, but no one knew where he went after. I went to the front desk, asking if they could page him or check if he'd used his keycard. The staff was polite but dismissive, assuring me he'd turn up. People got drunk and passed out in odd places all the time, they said. If he didn't show by evening, they'd do a formal check. Evening came, and Jake was still missing. Panic set in as security got involved. They searched his cabin, his phone was still there, his wallet, his shoes. The only thing missing was him. The realization hit me like a punch. He had never come back last night. They checked security footage. The last sighting of Jake was around 3 a.m., stumbling along the outer deck near the railing. He had been alone. The footage was grainy, but it was clear. 1 second he was there, the next he wasn't. Just gone. The ship crew launched a full-scale search, but there was nothing to find. If he had fallen overboard, it had happened hours ago. The ocean was endless. The chances of finding him were slim to none. The captain called me into his office to explain the protocols. They would notify the Coast Guard, report it to authorities, but the ship couldn't stop. The cruise would continue. I wanted to scream at him, demand that they turn around, but what good would it have done? Jake was gone, and I had no idea how or why. Other passengers whispered. Some said he must have been drunk and careless, that he had leaned too far over the railing. Others suggested something more sinister, that maybe he hadn't fallen, but had been pushed. The idea made my skin crawl. I didn't want to believe it, but the more I thought about it, the more it gnawed at me. Jake wasn't the type to just fall. The rest of the trip was a nightmare. I barely ate, barely slept. The cruise continued as if nothing had happened. People drank, danced, enjoyed the sunshine, while I sat alone in my cabin, staring at the spot where he had last been seen. When we docked, authorities questioned me for hours, but there were no answers to give. No body, no evidence, just another name added to the long list of people who had vanished at sea. I never intended to wander into the lower levels of the ship. It wasn't a place passengers were meant to go. But curiosity, boredom, and one wrong turn led me into a part of the vessel I should have never seen. The cruise had been my idea. A solo vacation, a way to escape the pressures of work. 7 days at sea, isolated from the stress of everyday life, seemed like a dream. But by the 4th day, I had explored everything the ship had to offer. The pools, the casino, the entertainment venues. I craved something different, something more. It started with a simple mistake. I was looking for the spa when I took a wrong turn, ending up in a dimly lit corridor marked crew only. A logical person would have turned back, but I wasn't a logical person that night. The curiosity was too strong. What did the crew areas look like? Was it as glamorous as the rest of the ship? I stepped through the door, expecting to be stopped immediately. No one came. The hallway was eerily silent, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead. I moved forward cautiously, convinced I'd only take a quick look before heading back. The hallway stretched further than I expected, leading to a series of unmarked doors. Then I heard it, Muffled voices, a quiet conversation. Someone was down here. I pressed myself against the wall, hoping to avoid being seen. The voices grew clearer as I crept closer. They were arguing. One voice, stern, authoritative, spoke in short, clipped sentences. The other, shaky and nervous, kept pleading. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone sent a chill down my spine. Then a sound cut through the conversation, something heavy dragging across the floor. Instinct screamed at me to leave, but my body refused to move. I peeked around the corner just as a door slammed shut. The hallway was empty again. I should have walked away, gone back to my cabin and forgotten the whole thing. But I didn't. I moved toward the door, hand trembling as I reached for the handle.
Locked.
Whatever was inside, someone didn't want it found. Footsteps echoed behind me. My heart lurched. I turned just in time to see a crew member appear at the far end of the hall. His uniform was crisp, but his expression was anything but friendly. He asked if I was lost. His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp, analyzing me. I stammered something about taking a wrong turn, about heading back. He didn't smile, didn't offer directions. He only nodded once and watched as I backed away. I spent the rest of the trip trying to convince myself it was nothing. A crew dispute, a storage issue, something benign. But every time I passed a crew member in the hallways above deck, I felt their gaze linger just a second too long. I never figured out what I stumbled upon below deck. I never saw that nervous voice's owner. But one thing is certain, I will never set foot on a cruise ship again.